Bet horse racing on DRF Bets. We'll match your first deposit of $200. Get free expert picks and past performances, plus weekly cash back. All from Daily Racing Form, the most trusted name in horse racing.
Hi everyone, I'm Brad Free with David Aragona, and this is the preview segment of Daily Racing Form's Derby Watch. And we're going to talk briefly about three potentially significant stakes races, two in particular, the Grade 3 Withers at Aqueduct, the Grade 3 Sam Davis down at Tampa Bay Downs, and we'll briefly mention a $100,000 stakes race that will be run out here in California. That's the El Camino Real Derby. David, once upon a time, the Remsen Stakes in fall at Aqueduct was an early indicator of future three-year-old class. Alidar finished second in 1977. Pleasant Colony won the Remsen via DQ, won the Kentucky Derby. Go for Gin, Thunder Gulch, Remsen winners who won the Kentucky Derby. In recent years, the Remsen, you could probably say the same thing about races in California, late season races in California and Kentucky. The Remsen not as critical moving forward than it once was. Agree?
For sure. The Remsen's recent history has not been super productive with regard to the Triple Crown, though I will say 2 Remsens ago in 2021, we did see Mo Donegal and Zandon fighting to the wire, and obviously Mo Donegal went on to win the Belmont Stakes, Zandon third in the Kentucky Derby, so it had a bit of a resurgence then. We'll see if that's the case this year, as we are going to see 2 horses coming out of the Remsen to compete in both the Withers and the Sam F. Davis this weekend.
That's exactly right, and that's why I bring it up. The Remsen Stakes, the 1-2 finishers, are both in action this weekend. One of them runs in the Withers on Saturday at Aqueduct. The Withers, a mile and 1/8. We talked a little bit about this race last week because we thought it was going to be run last week. It got postponed a week due to weather situation. Early voting, we should mention that early voting won the Withers a year ago, and he skipped the Derby and went on to win the Preakness. I found it interesting, and I'll say it again. No Withers starter has hit the Derby Exacta since the Breeders' Cup was inaugurated in 1984. So I'm not sure what the relevance of this race is, but there is a very good colt, and he's the only Withers starter that's on Derby Watch, and that's Arctic Arrogance, I should say. And Hit Show is going to come in for trainer Brad Cox. But talk a little bit about the Withers, if you don't mind, David.
Yeah, the New York path to the Kentucky Derby in general has not been as, I think, utilized by connections trying to guide a high-profile 3-year-old to the Kentucky Derby as some other circuits. And I think that's just because of the up-and-down nature of the distances. We stretch all the way out to 1 1/8 in the Withers, then cut back to 1 mile in the Gotham. So there's not the consistency there that some connections are looking for with regard to the stretch out. But it does give some opportunities in early February for connections to test the stamina of their 3-year-olds. And Arctic Arrogance, who's likely to go as the favorite in the Withers, has already gotten that experience going the 1 1/8, as we talked about in the Remsen. We can also take a look at the stretch drive of his most recent race when he ran in the Jerome. That was going the 1-turn mile at Aqueduct, and it's hard to really gauge the quality of this New York bred. He obviously has some talent for trainer Linda Rice, but it's hard to really know what he's faced in some of these races. So he's going to get a decent test on Saturday when he faces the likes of Hit Show, who's definitely an improving horse for Brad Cox.
Let's take a look at the stretch run of the Jerome, and this is the race in which Lugan Knight upset Arctic Arrogance. Arctic Arrogance ran well. He just got beat by a horse who was a little bit better on the day. I believe that David Grenick had reported that Arctic Arrogance had missed a workout going into the Jerome. He might have been a little bit short. We expect that he's going to add blinkers this weekend. And Arctic Arrogance, he's a good horse. He's in good form, and he should be, all things being equal, he should be very tough to beat. He's listed as the 18th on the Derby Watch list at odds of 50-1. His odds are either going to drop or he's going to drop off the list pending his performance this weekend. But he faces a very good horse coming in from Oaklawn Park, and I'm referring to Hit Show. Hit Show's not on the Derby Watch top 20, but boy, he sure could be if he runs as well this weekend as he ran last time out in an allowance race down at Oaklawn Park. Let's take a look at the stretch run of the Oaklawn Park allowance race on December 17th, David.
Yeah, Hit Show is a horse that had garnered a lot of hype in his debut race last year for trainer Brad Cox. The speed figure came back pretty slow, but I think this horse showed a lot of likable attributes that day. And I think that was on display once again in this 2-turn allowance victory, where he showed the ability to get the extra distance and finished off that race very nicely. Again, that was the short stretch at Oaklawn, going the mile distance, and certainly gave the impression that he's going to appreciate the added ground of a race like the Withers. And we saw the entries last week. It was just a field of 6 back then, and there was quite a bit of speed signed on to potentially press a horse like Arctic Arrogance, who is more of a front-running style, and that could benefit a horse like Hit Show. There's also been one horse that our colleague Dave Grenning reported is likely to be added to the Withers field this week, and that is the Bill Mott trainee Jungfrau, who's coming off a maiden victory at Gulfstream Park last time, actually elevated to that victory by disqualification, and he's one that does have some prior experience going the mile and an eighth distance, so he's an intriguing new player that could be another type that sits the right trip if that pace holds together in the race.
Jungfrau has started 3 times. He hasn't crossed the wire first yet, won via DQ. Hit Show also has started 3 times. Each of his subsequent starts have been better than the previous. On numbers, Hit Show has an advantage over Jungfrau, but Jungfrau by Arrogate out of a Tappet mare, I think it's pretty safe to say that the best is yet to come for Jungfrau. So an interesting edition coming up of the Withers this weekend with Arctic Arrogance and Hit Show squaring off. And a pretty interesting race down in Florida this weekend as well. The Grade 3 Sam Davis at 1 mile and 1/16. And only one of the likely entrants, we haven't seen the field yet, is on the Derby Watch list, and that is number 14th ranked W. Nell. We expect that he's going to start favored. He hasn't started since the Remsen. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Remsen in which he defeated Arctic Arrogance.
And I think we're really looking for some confirmation of this performance when he runs back in the Sam F. Davis, because this was a huge step forward from a speed figure standpoint for WNL. And obviously the added distance could have had something to do with that. He also was competing over a wet sealed track here. He actually won over a wet sealed track when he broke his maiden. So he has some questions to answer if the going is fast on Saturday at Tampa Bay Downs. And a horse that, based on this 90 buyer speed figure, is one of the fastest non-Bob Baffert trainees out there right now. But I think we're going to look for some confirmation of that number on Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's interesting about WNL, and our colleague Marty McGee talked about this or wrote about this in a piece that appears Friday. And he talked to the trainer, Danny Gargan, and this horse colt is out of a mare who is a pure sprinter. Her name was Wild Gams, but he is sired by Good Magic, so hopefully he gets his stamina on the top. He's already gone 1 mile and 1/8. I just find it interesting that a colt out of a fast sprint dam, he's won at 1 mile and 1/8 already, and he's a legitimate contender for 1 mile and 1/4. What about pedigree? Does it really even matter anymore as far as the Kentucky Derby goes?
It's really hard to say. I was concerned about the distance for him based on that pedigree fact that you cited, with the dam being more of a sprinter when he did run in the Remsen. But a lot of the good magics that we've seen have been getting better with added distance. That's not a big surprise. He's a son of Curlin himself and did well in these classic distance races during his racing career. So maybe a WNL is taking more after the sire side. He's definitely shown that grinding style, keeps finding more when his rider asks him in his races. So that does bode well for him getting added distance.
Yeah, he's only started 3 times, so and not since he was a 2-year-old. So he certainly has a lot of room to improve. As far as the overall significance of the Sam Davis, well, you only have to go back 1 year. It was won by Classic Causeway, who wheeled right back and won the Tampa Bay Derby, and he subsequently won a Grade 1 on turf. But then before that, you have to go back a ways. It was Bluegrass Cat who won this race in 2006. He finished second in the Derby. Belmont Travers, he won the Haskell. It's a race, the Sam Davis I'm referring to, with marginal historical significance, but the game has changed. The game is shrinking, and things do change. So we'll talk more about the Sam Davis next week in the recap segment of Derby Watch. In the meantime, let's address a race that will be run here in California on Saturday. It's the $100,000 El Camino Real Derby. This is another race that does not usually have a whole lot of significance. However, the winner of the El Camino Real Derby does get automatic entrance into the Preakness Stakes. They're both owned, both racetracks, Golden Gate Fields and Pimlico, owned by First Racing. 2 years ago, it was Rombauer who won the El Camino Real Derby, and then he popped up and won the Preakness a little bit later. It's probably a little bit of a reach to suggest that one of these El Camino Real Derby likely starters is going to pop up and win a Triple Crown race. But hey, you never know, right?
You really do never know. And with this race being run on the Tapeta surface, it's an unknown whether these horses might be better or worse on the dirt. They still have that to prove. Many of them have only run on the synthetic so far. It's an interesting field. I think it's going to come up as a fascinating handicapping race, but a lot of these horses do still have a lot to prove with regard to graded stakes credentials.
Some of the contenders that we expect are Chase the Chaos, who comes off a huge win over the track. He won by more than 7 lengths. Trainer Bob Baffert is expected to ship a son of twirling candy up the coast. His name is Gilmore. A horse named Harson, who is remotely related to Giacomo, Kentucky Derby upset winner. And then there's another horse named Passerando. So again, this is a race that does not typically, historically at least, have a lot of significance with regards to the Triple Crown, but we'll take the wait and see approach. And that is going to wrap it up for the recap segment, the preview segment. I better sign off before I completely lose my tongue. For David Aragona, I'm Brad Free, and we'll talk to you guys next week.